ideally you hire someone who has the skill set that you don't have and is like excited about the problem that they would be solving at the job as well.
Welcome to How I Fixed It, a podcast where we cut the noise and learn step-by-step strategies entrepreneurs use to grow. I'm your host, Madhav Malhotra, and today I'm lucky to be joined by Paige Whitehead, the co-founder of Nyoka Design Labs. Nyoka is a biotechnology company that uses microbes to replace harsh chemicals, like those in glow sticks. I'm especially excited to hear more about Paige's experience learning how to lead Nyoka's team while on the job. So thank you again for taking the time to join me today. I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about the rocket ship that is Nyoka right now. And I know that looking into your background, people would be very surprised to see how far you've come, including yourself. So for a little bit of context, would you mind talking about who you are, what Nyoka is doing, and how you ended up working here?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Madhav. Yes, my name is Paige Whitehead. I am the founder and CEO of Nyoka Design Labs. And our company as a whole kind of asks the question is like, how can we make this thing more sustainable? And right now, our main purpose and focus at our initial product is a glow stick that is powered with bioluminescent enzymes and is biodegradable. And it really is just such a amazing combination of what's possible in sustainable biotechnology, in sustainable materials as a whole, and also like just community celebration and like, really empowering people to feel good about, themselves and the planet and just where we're going in the field of sustainability, because there's really so much to be hopeful about. And it's not exactly what we hear on the news all the time. So it's kind of a little secret part of Nyoka. We don't advertise that the light wand is intended to like make you feel hopeful, but that's kind of what I hope people think when they see things like that. And for my background, I'm in microbiology and environmental studies in my degree program, and slowly realized I wanted to get into business after working in laboratories, after working in nonprofits, and finally working in sustainable enterprise. And I really just saw the impact you could have as a company, the direct impact you could have on changing people's spending patterns, on really restoring parts of the world and making sure that sustainability is really prioritized. And I think part of my curiosity is just asking wow, is this possible? Can we do this? And this is the way to do it right now in the world, is by becoming an entrepreneur. And that's the method. And I'm just always excited to learn more about how to do that thing.
Yeah. Could we dig a little bit deeper into that part of your story where you transitioned into entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I never knew I was leading myself towards that, or that the world was pushing me that way, whatever you want to take your look at it. But what I would say, especially earlier in my 20s, and I think for a lot of people, it's a time where you try a lot of things and you slowly find out, hopefully something you like and something you don't. And then you can make better choices through that trial and error process. And that's what basically I don't know, I feel life is about. And for me, that's kind of how I ended up here, where I loved university, but I didn't feel like it was super applicable. I loved working in labs, but you don't really see the impact of your work for a long time. And I've always been really interested in sustainability, ever since I was a pretty small child. It's always been kind of my driving question in my life, and learning more was such a big part of that. So I don't want to say that going to university was in any way a mistake. It was critical, it was pivotal, and it gave me the tools that I'm now using, in the field of entrepreneurship. But I guess I would say, to sum it up, is that it's a process, and whatever your thing is, I just kind of hope that for people who are listening, that if they can, just keep moving forward and not let people kind of say that isn't for you, or, that will never work just based on your past or what people think about you, then you'll be fine. If you're figuring out for yourself, then you're on the right track. No matter where you are on your path at any given point, you're doing it.
Yeah, I think I really just value your ability to take risk and go into the unknown, just try new things. But the reason I wanted to talk to you about leadership today is the reason that I can tell on this call, but the listeners can't. You're one of the nicest people that I know. When your body language conveys niceness, when you're talking about ideas, you'll talk about, okay, I want to help create this change in the world for people that are listening. Here's a piece of wisdom that can help you. I really admire those skills personally in a leader. So to start off with, I'd love to hear you just when you started Nyoka, as you put it, just a broke university student, and then now you have a lot more ability to make an impact in others' lives. Could you tell me about that transition period?
Thank you. That's really, really wonderful and kind of you to say. And in terms of leadership, I don't think I ever really saw myself like as a leader. It's almost an uncomfortable word. I think it comes with a lot of weight. But when I look back at how I spent time, one of the first things that I did as a like very young person was just get really passionate about saving the Vancouver Island marmots, which was an endangered species, local to the island where I grew up. And that was, I think, the first time where I just really let myself get like wrapped up in something. And I, fundraised, I like baked cookies and sold them at my school. And it ended up being absolutely transformative. I was invited to attend this UN Children's Conference on the Environment. That's actually when I attended UVic for the first time. It was held on UVic campus, and that's the first time I ever stepped on campus. And it just opened my eyes to like the whole world that was out there, people whose lives were about changing the world. And in my small town, that wasn't exactly what everyone was focusing on. We didn't have leadership programs. Like in high school, there were some clubs, and I ran the journalism club. And so I guess I've always kind of taken on leadership roles. But when I sit back and just think about my traits, I think the first one would just be like curiosity and maybe like open-mindedness. And maybe that's my leadership style. If I were to pinpoint anything, because that's what's really, I think I take on leadership roles because I get curious, and then if I'm curious about a problem, then I want to find a way to solve it. And if solving it means like organizing people or raising money, or doing a research project, then whatever it takes, kind of figure out a way to do it. And I think for me, that's been a pretty like strong trait. I think that's why I focus so much when I talk to people about what they might be able to do. It's just on figuring out what that thing is that just will keep you up at night, that thing that you want to solve, because then it won't be hard. You won't be like, oh, I don't like this. Like, why am I doing this? You'll always have that why, and that really makes some of the more challenging aspects of the job just make sense. It's worth it at that point if you're doing it for that purpose.
It sounds like it's not like, okay, I need this done. Jacob, get on it. Instead, Jacob, what are you curious about? And try to guide that person to that role that fits for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a team, it's usually a bit of both, because ideally you hire someone who has the skill set that you don't have and is like excited about the problem that they would be solving at the job as well. Like that's the perfect person to work with. So we're both happy. Everyone's like figuring out something that is intrinsically valuable to them. And the work is really collaborative in that way. So, for example, my technical lead, Daniel, like he is so hardcore into the extreme chemistry behind the bioluminescence, and that's not my expertise. And so working together, I've learned so much about like, even what it actually means to solve this problem on a really like granular molecular level. And another person on my team, they do all the accounting, and it's so complicated. And I know a little bit, enough to have a conversation and then just be so impressed that like they know how to do what they do, And that's their thing. They're really about financial literacy and building financial competencies. So, again, ideally that would be like someone who is in their purpose and is also able to turn that into something that is vocationally helpful, so they can, survive and feed themselves. And I think, if everyone has that, everyone would be a lot happier.
Yeah, that definitely would be a good outcome. But first of all, it's hard to identify, what is someone good at so that you can guide them in that way. But then second of all, figuring out how do you shape what they're good at to fit into the goal that you're working towards.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very ideal situation that would work out perfectly, So I always try and try for that. And again, with every single person, it really depends what will help in a certain way. For some people, it's, more freedom to make their own decisions and really have just a lot of agency. For others, who really like working together, it's, spending more time and building that relationship. Maybe it's providing training courses. I know I really value one-on-one time with people. I find for me, I definitely trend towards being introverted. I love having more one-on-one deeper conversations. And that's just how we get to know people, and often through just getting to know a person, you'll end up finding out about what they're really passionate about or interested in. And I don't think there's really a trick to it in that way. And, sometimes it takes a long time. And for some people, maybe, you're not a good fit in a personality wise way. And then, there's not much you can do about that. So I wouldn't say it works every single time, but hopefully if it's people who you're working with a lot, then that's how you can also make those decisions. Be okay, really get along with this person. They're really awesome in this way. And they bring a lot to the team. That would be kind of the ideal scenario again. But I think it's a pretty high bar, and I'm always looking to meet that bar with everyone I work with. And, the team I'm working with now is incredible. But I mean, I think you'd have to ask them if it's really working on any given day. Sometimes things get stressful, sometimes things don't work out. But again, I think that's where that purpose really helps get through some of the more challenging times.
Yeah, I think the purpose bit is definitely something I've heard echoed a lot. Lots of founders have told me the key hiring decision they have is this person excited about the problem? But as you said, there are many challenges that come up along the way. Do you remember times where you had to make, key decisions about your team, things weren't working, and you had to change something?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm always personally looking to improve upon myself is just my sense of confidence, and that I think just only comes with time and seeing if your decisions actually do turn out working out well. There's ways to kind of fake confidence, but I find even when I fake confidence, I'm not making decisions from a truly grounded place. And so when I think back, to just some insecurities I've had as an entrepreneur, as a leader, I think that's where I've made decisions that just end up being very difficult in the long term, where let's say this did happen kind of recently, where there's someone on the team who is just bringing me down in a way and suggesting that I couldn't do my job very well. And, for a while, I kind of believed them. I was I could really do a lot better, I'm new at this. There's so much that we need to get done in Nyoka, we could be at XYZ as a company and it's our first year, it's a mess. So a lot of it, I really took to heart, and I wanted to learn and I wanted to improve. But after a while, I was you know what though, if it's really good criticism and it's constructive, then hopefully you'll feel you can work on solving it together, and if someone is kind of part of a team in that way, then it'll be something you can build together, rather than, using something to kind of make people feel bad or they're not, skilled enough to do their job. And actually it was a lot of the successes recently that we've had based on decisions I've made that really improved my confidence. I was you know what, that person is wrong. I don't know how I could have fixed that before, because maybe it's the downside of being curious is always being someone else could be right. And, there's kind of that sense of fluidity within any decision or any, feedback that you'll get. And I'm really open to feedback. So that was uniquely difficult. And it really, I think, drew out some of my insecurities around, being a young person, not running a business before. And so it was kind of a vulnerable spot. And so that was really challenging to figure out, and it took some time to gain the confidence and see that you can take criticism, but that doesn't mean that you kind of have to sit back and let someone treat you in a way that isn't respectful or isn't helpful.
I appreciate the example of how you're still working on these skills. It is a constant journey, and it's amazing to hear that you're still growing. In terms of what you said about making sure that You can track your decisions over time to see there are some areas I need to do better in, but there are some areas that I do well in. How do you track those?
Yeah, there's kind of this thing around like an earned sense of confidence that I think only comes when you really are like struggling to solve a problem. And then if you see a little bit of improvement, then it just feels so good because you know how hard it was, or like you remember the feeling when you weren't sure if it would work. And, part of that is, I think, in the last year, I wanted to run a small Kickstarter, and I was basically doing it by myself. There were a million reasons not to do it. I just wanted to do it. and it really was like the first whole turn of the like Nyoka engine, which was, advertising, reaching out to people, spreading the word. It was following through, doing interviews, and then it was launching the Kickstarter, most stressful 6 weeks ever. Because it was the first one we've done. We haven't really, we're really just building our community at that point, and it's always going to be something that we're working on. Then COVID happened, and then fulfillment was really difficult, and so we were behind schedule, and it didn't feel great. And the product that we shipped, it was cool, but it wasn't like where I wanted it to be. So it really felt, that in itself felt kind of vulnerable. It was imperfect. A lot of the things I was like, this could be so much better, but we just got to put it out. And having a successful Kickstarter formed a huge piece of our product validation. It enabled us to get into IndieBio, to get into some similar programs, having some revenue. It just goes so far to prove market traction and product validation. It was horrible, it's difficult. I wouldn't do it again. But I learned so much. It really, really paid off, and definitely I didn't necessarily get told by anyone like, oh, you should definitely do that. It just was more of this, like, we're going to do this. And yeah, that's just an example of how, it was risky. It definitely wasn't perfect, out the door. And I did get feedback from some people that, I shouldn't do that. It was just too early, et cetera, et cetera. But it was awesome. And it was one of my favorite parts of that was actually doing a Reddit AMA. And I just got to talk to hundreds of people, and everyone was curious and asking questions. And I just got to chat with people online who were like also, into sustainability or biotech or entrepreneurship. And that was awesome. I love just connecting with people, who are similar in some way and passionate and just curious.
What allowed you to be able to make that decision by yourself when you had all these other voices saying, don't do it?
That's a difficult question. And I actually just read this amazing book, The Secret Life of Your Mind. And it kind of goes into your conscious brain and your unconscious brain, and how in your conscious brain, you make very rational, logical decisions. And it's kind of slower, but, in some situations it works really well. But in other situations, maybe such as deciding to do the Kickstarter, it's really complex. There's a lot of reasons why or not. There's a lot that goes into it, even beyond like the pros and cons in terms of what it would even take, like what capacity do I have? There's a lot that goes into a decision like that. And based on, some understanding of the like more unconscious mind, like the kind of decisions that we make that feel intuitive actually, come together through all these different parts of your minds, like that kind of come together and give you this like sense of direction, and it's very scientific, but it feels very like intuitive and kind of mysterious. But I would say that decision really came, like, it was an intuitive decision. It just felt like it was the right time. And I just kind of knew I had to do it. And, it wasn't like a logical, calculated, like on a calculator logical decision. It really just felt right. And I wish I could answer more. I wish I understood more. That's why I read this book, because I would love to understand like why sometimes things just feel right and feel like the right time. And that's basically that is kind of how I end up making more complex kind of gray area decisions. Usually at some point it just is the right time, and there's a feeling around it.
Yeah, that's a really nice skill to have. Personally, I don't have that. So I envy that, because, like you said, with logic, there's always a lot of pros and cons for each option.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good that you're able to get out of analysis paralysis and actually just make the end call with that.
I mean, there's pros and cons to that too. Like, don't get me wrong, Sometimes I do get caught in the analysis paralysis, and then that's usually what I know I need to go to sleep and not think about it for a day, and then maybe some inkling of a direction will like start to appear. But it's an imperfect process.
That's happened to me a lot with the sleep. I agree with that. I think the last thing that I'd want to wrap up on is with resources like that. I know you read a lot. I know you're very curious. If you could think of any resources, any books, any skills in general that you found most impactful in helping you, would you have anything come to mind?
Yeah, definitely. Especially if it's based on, let's just talk about startups first. It's so different trying to like bring something to life than like run it and keep it going. And I think there's so many management books and like books that, really focus on like larger companies. But the one book that I found really helped me get a sense of the kind of attitude that works for a startup. It's just called The Lean Startup, and it's really well regarded. One of the paragraphs that really hit me, I was like, oh crap, is talking about basically not launching early enough and not getting out there and talking to customers, and just how you can just like, circle around the drain for years and like never even know if what you're working on will ever be successful. And they're like, you got to get out there and talk to people. And that actually really woke me up when I read that book. I was like, I think that was probably part of the feeling that went into the decision to like launch the Kickstarter, was kind of like absorbing that information and hopefully like storing it away somewhere kind of useful. So that was great. I think any kind of like book on meditation and self-knowledge, there's tons out there. Like, I don't know if I'd recommend any specific one. It's pretty personal, like what kind of style you like. But I would say like anything that relates to you getting to know yourself better just really helps keep you like healthy and responding in an emotionally non-reactive way when things get stressful, or someone at a panel asks you like a question that's kind of mean. It just really helps to feel really solid in yourself. And so I'm constantly working on that. Like, I'm no expert by any means, but so whatever practice, or, maybe it's not meditation, maybe you feel really awesome dancing, or maybe you like go for a run. Like, I just think those kind of skills and like self-knowledge and self-care is so deeply important. Oh, one thing that I have done though, kind of based on that, is basically set up for myself. It's called a wellness action plan. And I identify my indicators if I'm feeling extra stressed. And so I kind of have now in my mind like this system where it's like green, yellow, or red. And if I'm green, things are good. I'm feeling good. Everything's fine. If it's yellow, then I'll be like, ooh, like I'm feeling extra stressed. I'm having trouble sleeping. Maybe I have a nightmare that like our bank account runs out of money. That literally happened to me the other night. I was like, this is no good. It's not even like going to happen, but like clearly an indicator of just feeling more stressed. And so then as part of my action plan, I've developed a bit of a toolkit around what I'll do if I notice that the stress is increasing. And so that might be going for more walks, spending more time with friends, whatever it is for you that rejuvenates you as part of that plan. And then when things are red, then, maybe that will be like really making sure I talk with my mentor or coach, like much more often, maybe set up time for that. Maybe it's actually taking a full break and just letting people know that, and also telling people, hey, I'm really overwhelmed. I'm not going to be on my game right now. I'm doing minimal work, and like, that's okay. And I think I value the authenticity around there, because I don't want people to feel like robots, like around me or like at work, So if I'm struggling, I also don't want to have to like hide that necessarily at work and be like, what, if I can do 4 hours of work on a day where maybe I feel really like upset or stressed, and then call it a day and feel good, like that's awesome. I wouldn't want to like have that give something to hide or feel too. I think the judgment is a really difficult one to navigate.
Yeah, I feel like whenever we talk, I learn more about your self-awareness. I think it's a big lesson that I've taken away from just talking to you throughout time. So I will make sure to add all the resources that you mentioned throughout in the thread.
Well, there's one more actually. Yeah. And why I like this one is actually because I think there's something for everyone in this book, and it's called Tools of Titans, and it's Tim Ferris' book. So like, say you want about him, but they went and interviewed people who are at like the top of their field across entertainment, in academia, in entrepreneurship. So it's not like one person telling you like what is right or the way they've figured something out. It's all of these people who have solved their own life in their own way, and some of the advice they give is completely different than the person who's in the next chapter, right? So there's really something for everyone in that book. And yeah, if there's one book that maybe you'd find some good nuggets in, like every time I open that book, I learned something.
So I think that's a good note to wrap up the podcast on. So I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all these different corners of your mind. I know it is a hard skill. I know there are hard questions that I did ask. So I respect you doing your best to put together information and hopefully share something for others to learn through this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a bit tired today, so I really don't know if I was as concise or verbose as normal, but this is really fun for me. Like I love talking about just life, and if there's like even one thing I can say that helps someone, then I think it's so worth it. So yeah, absolutely. Happy to do this. Thank you, Madhav.